All across the state, parents, teachers, administrators, and elected officials have wrestled with how to handle schools during the pandemic. Some started fully in person and some started as a hybrid where students come in 2 days a week. Salt Lake City was the only school district that started the school year online with the intent on determining if and when to resume in-person learning. On November 17th, the school board decided to start phasing in elementary school students in late January. Earlier today, we caught up with ABC4's Jordan Burrows, who looked into the issues and concerns around this move in a special report coming up tonight at 10. Jordan, thank you so much for joining us tonight. It's good to see you here. Salt Lake City School District was the only school district to start the year completely online. Based on what you've seen and who you've spoken with, has that decision worked the way it was supposed to?
I would say it depends on who you ask. So the school board would say yes, they're the entity that makes that decision. And then on the flip side, I talked to several parents who were split on that decision. Some supported the remote learning, whereas some supported going back in person. And some other people I actually spoke to transferred into the Salt Lake City School District because of the remote learning. And on the flip side, some have left Salt Lake City because of that remote learning. So I guess all in all, it just depends on who you ask. These parents want what's best for their children. So they're trying to do what's best for them, their school-age children's education.
This is just a situation that has impacted families so differently. So the decision to have school online or in person has a nuance to it. What are some of the contrasting issues the school board has to take into account in determining how to run schools this year?
I think all schools around the country are dealing with that nuance, dealing with this is new. I mean, COVID has, been around in this country about 8-9 months, and it's hitting Utah pretty hard. So the schools have to look at, one, I think the infrastructure that they have, do they have the money and capability to provide internet and to provide the programs for their schools? Money is very important for those schools right now. With Salt Lake City School District, they were looking at, when I talked to them, they have almost 25,000 students in that district. And what they're looking at is what age groups can go back as soon as possible. Their number one priority, when I talked to the president of the school board, Melissa Ford, she said they want to get children back to school, but it has to be done safely. That being said, I've reached out to the Utah Department of Health. Everyone could get COVID, right? But only 1% of the hospitalizations in Utah, 1.3% of those hospitalizations have been attributed to kids ages 1 through 14. So those elementary school students, as of right now with Salt Lake City, are going to go back in January, the end of January. It's because that age group is less susceptible to catch COVID. So they're looking at what age groups are most susceptible to COVID and when they think it is acceptable to go back, looking at the data from the State Department of Health.
Now, the school board met on November 18th to talk about the plan going forward. Do you know what came from that meeting?
Yeah, so it was 5 hours long. It was an extremely long board meeting, but I think that's what they needed to do. They have all of their board meetings. The Salt Lake City School District School Board has it all throughout YouTube. They posted them on there, starting, with the interim superintendent, the school board. They've had parents get on them. They've had doctors on them. It's a very long Zoom call, but it includes all this information. They laid out options, what they wanted, and the school board then talked through them. They walked through them, and they decided what was best thus far. This plan could change if the data changes from the Utah Department of Health, but as of now, they decided that option for pre-K through 6th graders to go back in phases throughout the end of January and throughout the beginning of February. It was a long meeting. It was a lot of communication. Unfortunately, I think the public didn't get a long time to talk. They were only able to chit chat for about 15-20 minutes. There were also teachers on the call. They got both sides of the issue, that is, which I think is wonderful. But the thing is, hear from parents. And I also think you need to hear from the kids. It might not be the most appropriate setting to have kids on the Zoom call, but maybe teachers should maybe survey their kids and relay that to the school district, the school board, that is.
It's so hard because how do you come up with a solution that is a compromisable fit for everybody? So what's your takeaway from doing the story, or what can we look forward to for your special report coming up tonight at 10?
I think the takeaway, like I mentioned, is these parents are striving. They're yearning for the best they can get for their kids. it is so crucial to talk to these parents. They're the ones that are paying for that education. They're the ones that kids have to go through pre-K first, all the way, through high school, and then they send them off to college. It is a year unlike any other. Um, we all know that. So it has been such a tough determining factor what they should do with their children. I would say that I learned throughout this Zoom call, and what people be able to learn throughout my story is it is best. A social worker and doctors have told me it is best for kids to learn in school. That's the best structure and schedule that kids can happen inside the classroom. However, we're faced with a global pandemic. It is a catch-22. You're in between a rock and a hard place. And I think overall, parents have to decide whether they want to stay in that school district with what decision they've made, or if they would like to leave. It's a lot of stress. It is a lot of anxiety. And I hope that my story tonight can show people that there are people struggling, and the school board is doing what's best. Parents want what's best, and social workers, doctors, nurses, all these frontline workers are doing what they can to help the community. So all in all, my message would be from people watching my story tonight is understand that the community needs to come together, is to realize that this is a hot button issue. This shouldn't divide communities. If anything, this should bring you together because they all want what's best for their child's education.
You've been hearing from ABC4's Jordan Burrows. Jordan, we look forward to your story tonight at 10. Thank you so much for joining us tonight to just dig a little bit deeper into your special report. Coming up next, we'll hear from Melissa Ford, the president of the Salt Lake School Board. What was their thought process as they made the decision to move some grades back to in-person learning?
We've always been committed to keeping our students, our employees safe, and that's our goal. We know that students don't learn if they don't feel safe.
That was Melissa Ford, president of the Salt Lake City School Board, in an interview with ABC4's Jordan Burrows, talking about the difficulty of the decision the school board made about returning some grades back to in-person learning. Welcome to our second In Focus segment tonight on in-person learning in the Salt Lake City School District. Joining us now is a person you heard at the top of the segment via Zoom, Melissa Ford, the president of the Salt Lake City School Board. Melissa, thank you so much for joining us tonight and being a part of this conversation.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Melissa, let's go back to the beginning. Talk about the decision back in March when schools went online across the state and then stayed online the rest of the year.
Yeah, when Governor Herbert dismissed schools in March, it originally was intended to only be for 2 weeks, and then it became 2 more weeks, and eventually the rest of the school year. It was unexpected, but I think our students and our teachers did an incredible job of adapting to the changes. We know not everything was perfect, but I'm really proud of the resilience that our students and our staff showed through that time.
And here we are, 8 months later, and we didn't think we would be here, but we're gonna adapt because we're resilient. As the pandemic continued, each school board in the state made its decision on how to handle school for the academic year. Salt Lake City School District was the only one to go completely online. Talk about what went into that decision.
Yeah, Salt Lake City has been one of the hardest hit areas by COVID-19 here in Utah, and especially our underserved communities. It was important for us to look at the COVID-19 health data for our city, for Salt Lake City, and to take into account the impacts the virus has had on our families. Listening to feedback from families was really important, and based on data from our county health department and the COVID numbers and the information we had about the virus at the time, the board voted to begin the year via remote learning. But we've always said from the very beginning that our goal was to bring students back to in-person learning as soon as we could safely and sustainably do so, which is why we continue to examine the data and information we're learning about the virus as closely as we can.
Yeah, and that decision is not easy to make. I really commend what you guys have to do over there at the school board. Now, there was a horizon for that decision. You were going to reevaluate the situation at this time. What contributed to the board's decision to phase students into elementary school starting in January?
Yeah, and as I mentioned, the board continues to look at COVID-19 numbers and information from our county health department on a regular basis. We're committed to staying informed and to learning from our public health experts. The superintendent brought us some data at our last board meeting from the county health department that indicates that elementary age students are contracting the coronavirus at similar rates regardless of whether they're currently attending school in person or online. And so in looking at the numbers for all the school districts in Salt Lake County, there was no statistically significant difference for elementary age students. And so this tells us that even though COVID cases are rising in the community at large, the risk doesn't increase significantly for elementary students when they attend school in person. The same data showed higher risk for middle school and high school students, which is why we're not looking into bringing them back in person at this time, but we will continue to monitor the data and are committed to bringing those students back when the conditions are right.
Joining us now is Tenesha Luckett, a mother of a student in the Salt Lake City School District. She participated in ABC4's Jordan Burrows Town Hall. Tenesha, thank you so much for being here tonight to continue this conversation with us.
Absolutely, thanks for having me.
Tenesha, let's start about having you telling us about your family and how you came to the Salt Lake City School District.
Sure, yeah, I am a mother of a 9-year-old boy. We came to the Salt Lake School District from another school district because the way that they were running their online program just wasn't conducive to learning. So I did some research and I realized that Salt Lake School District was completely online, and I liked how they were running their program just from other parents that I knew that were in the district. So I decided to make the transfer.
What has your experience been like with online schooling for your son?
Night and day from the previous district. His teacher is super attentive. She's with him like a whole school day, and then some, because he is a little pill sometimes. So she'll stay online after with him and just give him a little extra attention, as well as some other students in the class as well. So it's been a great experience. I cannot complain one bit.
Now, you want schools to be continued to be online. Tell us why you feel that way.
Yeah, I just feel like the experience online has been just as good as what he would have gotten in school. Obviously not the same, but maybe it's specific to his teacher, and that just says a lot about her. But the experience that we've had online has been beneficial. I just think it's too soon to be back in schools, personally, for our household. And so it just was the best decision. It's been an excellent decision so far.
I have a follow-up question for you.
Yeah,
I know
absolutely.
For some parents, managing their students learning from home adds to what you already have to handle with parenthood. How's that experience been for you, having to add that onto your plate?
Yeah, absolutely. I am a single mother. I am a business owner. I own a job and I'm a hairstylist. So to say that I'm busy is an understatement. I think that one way that I have handled it is relying on family. I am grateful enough to say that I do have family that I'm able to rely on. I know that's not the case for everybody. However, outside of doing what I do on my own, I also make time for his education as well. So on my downtime when I am watching The Bachelorette, right? I make sure that I'm looking through his calendar and making sure everything is done, asking him if he needs help. So just taking that extra time out of my busy schedule to make sure that I'm holding myself and him accountable for the things that he should be doing in school, just like as if he was doing homework in in-person learning.
Now, during the break, I gave you the nickname Tenacious Tenesha, and now that you tell me more about yourself, I'm like, you really are Tenacious Tenesha.
Thanks.
Talk about the town hall that you were a part of with our own ABC4 Jordan Burrows. What did you think about talking to other parents who wanted to go back to in-person schooling?
I thought it was really eye-opening. I obviously have friends on both sides of the spectrum, friends that want to be back in schools, friends that kind of are on my side of things. So it was kind of eye-opening to hear other opinions. I didn't change my mind, but I did appreciate being able to come to a table respectfully and hear other people out, because I do feel like it was a beneficial conversation to have. And like I said, it was respectful, so it was kind of nice to hear another perspective. Like I said, it didn't change my mind, but it definitely was good to hear other perspectives.
Well, we heard from the school board's president, Melissa Ford, in the last segment. She did say that those who want to stick to online learning can continue to do so. With this board's decision now, it does affect your son. Yeah. What are you going to choose to do, or how does this decision, will it impact your family?
Online is definitely the way that we're going to go until things get better, and that's just what it is. And the only thing that I worry about in this situation is wearing out the teachers. What does that mean for them having to do online and in person? I can only imagine how exhausting that would be. I'm exhausted watching his teacher teach. So to be responsible for in-person and online, I can't even imagine that stress. So as far as me and my house, we will do what we have been doing, and that's not going to change. Regardless if that means I have to jump to 6 different districts, that's what I'm going to do. However, I do worry about the teachers and their mental health as well as their stress levels in the process.
We have time for one more question.
Absolutely.
There is one more board meeting on December 1st, and we know it's really hard to be able to sneak in there and get your comment in during like the public comment period.
Absolutely.
But if you could get in there and say something to the board, what would you say if you had the opportunity?
I definitely would let them know that as much as we understand that funding is important, and as much as we understand that getting things back to normal, right, as normal as they're going to get, is important. I do also think that the teachers' mental health should be considered. I think that the children's mental health should be considered, even though, you know, COVID cases are rising. Why are we going back when they're getting higher? It just doesn't make any sense to me without a solid plan. And so I just would consider, if nothing else, consider your staff and consider their mental health in the process.
It's really great to hear a parent speak out in support for teachers. Thank you so much for doing that, because we love our teachers and we know that they are our essential workers.
Absolutely.
We've been hearing from Tenesha Luckett, a parent in the Salt Lake City School District. Thank you so much for being here tonight to add to our conversation. We're sending you good vibes as you have to continue to navigate this difficult time, as with all parents.
Thank you so much for having me, Rosie.
Now, we did reach out to parents who were in support for in-person learning, but we were unable to get anyone scheduled in time for this show.